Waiting for everything to boot up here. Hello for those that can see me or catching me early. There we go. Looks like everything is loaded up there. Cool. So thanks everybody for joining. In this video, we are going to be doing more updates to our COVID-19 project. So if we remember where we last left off, we did some updates. We started to schedule our COVID-19 object data refreshes. So we're going to need to do some updates and checks on that one, because if we see over here, it does not look like this has been running daily with the last modified dates. And then once we get that squared away, we are going to try and probably only start working on a heat map because it might take a little bit to figure some of that stuff out. And then whatever else comes up along the way, if I think of anything out there. So if you don't know, I'm Walters954, and this is some hands-on project that we're working on. So I'm refreshing the COVID-19 dashboard. We can see that the data did not change, and we're expecting that to change. So if we look on our data like we just saw, all of these date last modifies, they have not changed. So we need to figure out why that is happening. And I have a hunch, but we can probably see it now as we go through this. So the last time we ran this, well, first, let's actually check that our scheduled jobs are running, right? So we look at our scheduled job. Here's a nightly job, and this is the one that has that Apex class that we set up before. We may be able to see an error in the logs. It's probably the job logs, Apex jobs. Let's see. Yeah. And we're starting to get some stuff here. So call out from Apex not supported, and I kind of lulled myself into a false sense of security when we ran this Apex Anonymous last time. So we ran this and we executed the actual method, but we didn't schedule it. And I haven't worked with scheduled jobs in a little bit, so that's probably why I kind of thought that, hey, this would be all right. This would work out when we scheduled it, but I got an email over the weekend or the next day saying that this did not work out. So let's get to figuring out how to make this work properly. And it's actually not that complicated. One thing I do want to do is figure out a way to actually run our scheduled job in the console properly, because this will execute our method like normal, but we want to schedule it like an actual scheduled job. So I did a quick search and I found this Salesforce article on running Apex scheduled code. So I'm actually going to copy this and paste it in our anonymous window. Doesn't paste very well, but that's fine. Let's just fix it up here. There we go. And this should hopefully be a real scheduled job. So like we're calling system.schedule to set the date time. And it looks like for minutes, this is down to 10. I want this to run in the next minute, so we'll do that. And then let's comment this out so we don't get a false positive there. And we've updated our schedule job. So this should schedule our current schedulable class for 1 minute out. So let's execute this and see what happens. And if we go back to our scheduled jobs, we should hopefully see one. So we're seeing one out here at 2:47. So let's give that a minute to update, and hopefully it won't go through, but it'll give us our correct error and then we can fix it. So while we wait for that to go off in the debug logs to show that that has an error, I'm going to kind of skip ahead. And if we think about the error, it is it's coming up because you're not really allowed to do call outs from scheduled jobs. And that's for various amount of reasons, mostly because of the time that we allocate for it to send out. So what we need to do is call the scheduled job asynchronously. So basically whenever it returns or whenever we call it out, it can do it on the system's time and not right away. So that's going to be a future method. And when we look at, there we go. When we look at the error message that we have here, call out from scheduled Apex class not supported, that basically means that, hey, we're doing the schedule call out. It's calling this HTTPS method, which is a call out, and that's not allowed unless we do certain things to allow that. So if we're going through and testing this out properly or making changes to this, what I would do is, the first thing I would do, especially if I didn't know how to solve this, was just do a Google search and see what comes up. So the first Stack Exchange answer, see here, looks like we need to use a future method, and the future method allows things to be called asynchronously. If we look into this article, this was Spring 10. Wow, that's pretty old. But if we look into this method, we're seeing a specific, I think they're called decorators, but specific decorator for the @future callout equals true. And I'm pretty sure that's all we will need to add to make our schedule class work properly. And I had a hunch about this early on when I was creating, wrong place, sorry. When I was creating this method, but I kind of wanted to leave it to see if anything has changed. I have not worked with scheduled classes in a while, so things could have changed from API versions. Now we are getting a couple errors out here, and that is because, the first one is because we tried to change our schedule class, and that's not allowed as long as it's scheduled, so let's delete that one. And then the second one is that the return times are not allowed for scheduled jobs. Or sorry, for future methods. So let's just go ahead and return void here, because even though we are returning something right now, but it's not going anywhere. So we're not doing anything with it, so we don't need to return anything there. Let's try to save that up and hopefully everything works out. Schedule job still in progress. Oh, we still have our original one that fired 1 minute ago. So let's try that. There we go. So everything looks like it's saved up. We have our future decorator out here that's doing the call out. So basically what we need to do is run this again for 1 minute, and let's see if anything comes up in that 1 minute time. So while that is going, I will say that the next part of this, which is the heat map, that's going to require us, I won't say require us. We're doing it in Lightning Web Components. So that's a new, latest development technology that Salesforce has released. And the main reason we're doing that is because, one, I would like to learn it a little bit better. I'm not as well versed in LWC as some of the other types of development methods that Salesforce has. And two, there's some really good documentation about it. I forgot where I was going with the second one. Anyway, so there's a bit of setup for getting LWC to run correctly. You will need to install Visual Studio Code or some type of IDE. You will need to install the Salesforce CLI, and I think that's it in terms of the install. Make sure you have an org. I'm going to have a link to a video somewhere. You probably can't see me pointing, but I'll probably release a video pretty soon on installation of all of that stuff and just getting you ready to get to this point. I already have it installed on this computer, so I'm not going to do that now, but that's just something to note there, that if you're looking to follow along from this point, you will need to, if you don't already have it, pause and take some time to do that installations. Look for the cards wherever they come from at the top for that video. Cool, and so it looks like that future method has run. Let's take a look at our data here, do a quick refresh. And it looks like all of that data has run properly, so that's cool. We're getting some updated values. Perfect. And then if we refresh our dashboard here, we're starting to see some new numbers come in at the end here. So that is really good. It's definitely what we wanted to see. And now at the end of this, we should be able to reschedule our Apex job because it'll run properly now since we're testing it properly. So schedule Apex. I'm going to call this nightly job again. Let's pick our schedule call out. Want this to update daily, in the night, and until we die. Cool. Other than that, the last thing we need to do is, at least for the schedulable and the refresh aspect of it, is to take away the one that we've done for 1 minute. So it's this one. Let's delete that. Cool. So now we are ready to get cracking with the heat map aspect of it. So we'll probably put the heat map somewhere on the home page, but what we need to do to get started with that, and I already have Visual Studio Code pulled up here, or maybe I'll go over what we are going to use for this first. So I already have Visual Studio Code here, but let's take a moment to review some of the different things that we're going to use for this. So to get the heat map working, we're going to use an open, or we're going to use, yeah, let's say an open source. We're going to use an open source JavaScript library called Leaflet Jas. This is a mapping library that I've seen used multiple times. Salesforce has even used it in some of their Trailhead modules, and I've used it a couple times for different clients as well. So it's pretty cool, pretty easy to use, and you know, I like it, and it's free. We could potentially use Google Maps, but I haven't seen an easy out-of-the-box heat mapping feature with Google Maps as far as I know, so that's something I have to look into, but I already know that Leaflet can do it, so that's why I'm using that. And in one of their tutorials, it has an interactive heat map, and that's what we're going to be kind of following. So the one thing you'll need to do here is, first, if you're using this in some sort of production or for monetary values, you may need to look into the licensing of Leaflet. Since I'm using this for education, I'm pretty sure I'm clear. I looked at the copyright and licensing and all of that. So just be careful if you're trying to put this in, I don't know, some type of paid product that you're doing. You may need to pay for it or something else. Just double check that. I want to put that disclaimer out there so people don't come hunting me down. The second thing is you'll need to download it. So go ahead and come to this download page, hit Leaflet Jas, or this, whichever the latest stable version is, and you know, have that one downloaded on you. Another thing that we will probably be using, we might not get to that just yet. Special maps. So we're going to be following, oh yeah, it does have the access token on here. Okay, so we are also going to be using Mapbox. So this is a Leaflet Jas displays and has all of the, let's say, technology behind showing the map for us, but you can have different map types that you can use inside of Leaflet Jas. A lot of these are going to come from this Mapbox API, so you'll need to request a token from them. So I may already be signed in. You're totally seeing my token, but that's fine because I was playing around with this over the weekend, and then I guess I'll just delete it later. But definitely sign up with Mapbox. Once again, read through any security concerns or copyright concerns that if you're using this for your company that you may have, and you know, this is at least what we're using right now to make all of this stuff work. Cool. So at least to start, we're going to be following this tutorial, getting everything set up, and probably the next video we'll be working specifically on the heat map and getting that rolling. Cool. I think that's everything. So we talked about Visual Studio Code, we talked about Leaflet Jas, talked about Mapbox. Let's start the code. So let's open a folder, and I'm going to select this folder here and probably create a new project as well, because I kind of want to start from scratch. So if you're not super familiar with Visual Studio Code, you can, what we need to do is create a new project to house all of our information, all of our Lightning Web Component information, and hook that up to our org. We can do this multiple ways. So we need to open the command palette, which is either going to view command palette or Control-Shift-P. And then we need to create a project. So there's create a regular project and a project with manifest. I'm assuming most people will want to create a project with manifest. What this does, it creates a package.xml, and then you can kind of pull all of your metadata from your org or specific metadata from your org. Or you can do it the more modular way, which is creating a project and pulling the data from there. So that's what I'm going to do, but I would say for most people, if you're only working on one org, or if it's not a Trailhead org, or you can even do it with a Trailhead org, but doing it with a manifest, you're allowed to pull items or pull your metadata with package.xml. With creating a project, it's a little bit more streamlined, or what's the word I'm looking for? Individualized on the way you select the components that are inside of your package project. Yeah, we'll go with that. I'll make a video that explains it a little bit better. So let's name this heat map leaflet.js stream, sure. And we want to create it in this folder. I've just kind of organized all of my Trailhead folders together. Cool, so now we have our package, and we now, like when we look through all of this stuff, it's going to be blank. Like our LWC stuff, nothing's in there, nothing's in our objects, which is fine. And if we had done this with manifest, we could pull down all of our org's information. We can technically do that with a project as a non-manifest project, but it's since we're going to be creating this stuff from scratch, it might be a little bit easier just to do that. So now I need to actually create my Lightning Web Component, and yeah, let's just start with creating our Lightning Web Component. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-P, create Lightning Web Component, click that. We need to, or I think we need to authenticate first. So you can see down here that there's no default org set. This is because we need to authenticate. So once again, it's basically just linking our org, our current org, to it's linking our, what the heck is this called? Visual Studio Code project with our Salesforce org, because you can link it to multiple. So we can see here that there's this authorize org. You'll click that. It'll pop up with a regular Salesforce window. You'll log in with your credentials, and then you'll be signed in. What I'm going to do, since I already know I have a ton of credentials in here, I'm going to click this and log in with my Trailhead org. What I don't want you guys to see is all of the other orgs that I have in here, because that's no fun. So I'm going to log in really quickly. And if it worked properly, you'll see something like this. And then where's my output panel? Show. You can see that, you know, I've set my default SFDX project org. I've authenticated to that THBB, which is Trailhead Brave Badger, yeah. So now I'm authenticated. You'll know that it's connected if down in this bottom left little panel here, it says the org that you just created or you just authenticated with. I'll definitely go in more detail once we get to the actual video with this one. So cool. Now that it's authenticated, we can Control-Shift-P. Oh, didn't do P. And create our Lightning Web component. We're going to call this heat map. I think we're just going to call it heat map, right? Yeah, why not? And then next through all of that stuff, and it's going to create some boilerplate code for us to look at. So we get these 3 different files here. There's a template, there is a heatmap.js, and there is this metadata file. And for us, let's see if there's some basic LWC stuff that we can pull up, just so we can get it on the page and start to test this out. So I don't know, Trailhead LWC. This looks promising. Yeah, let's create a hello world. I just want the code so that we can copy pasta it in so that we can see something on the page. So there we go. I can actually close this too. Let's grab the insides of here for our JavaScript. Where'd it go? Cool. And then there's going to be some metadata stuff. So all this metadata stuff is doing is saying which pages you're allowed to look at. So we're saying that it's allowed to be out there, and one of the places that we can actually put it is the home page, also record detail or app pages and record pages. So now that we have that done, let's actually deploy this. So Control-Shift-P again, deploy, and let's deploy this source to org. So we're taking all of our metadata that we have in here, and we're deploying it to our THBB Trailhead org. And if we scroll down, it looks like that was successful. Now, if we do a quick refresh, and we should be able to put this on the page. So we're going to edit page, scroll down to custom, wait for it to load. We got some nice big space over here to put our brand new component if this ever loads. Come on. Let's bring this up again. We do have a name. The name's probably going to be heat map. I think we can specify a name somewhere around here. There we go. Ooh, we got a lot of stuff. There we go. So this is our brand new Lightning Web component that we just created. And just to show you that, it's working. So that is perfect. We've created our Lightning Web component. We've got, we've got it in here. Now let's actually start to change it around so that we can show an actual map on here. The next part of this, I want to quickly show you all the documentation. So it is, and it's what I'm going to be following along with. So I'll type in LWC third-party libraries. And there we go, it's the right one. So there's a couple different things we have to do. Have our third-party library downloaded, upload it into Salesforce as a static resource. And then this is where the Lightning Web component piece comes in. We are going to basically access our static resource, do a couple things to load it, and then finally change our output. Excuse me. We're going to change our HTML page itself so that it looks at our new page that we created. So I'm going to be following along with that down here. Just as an FYI, if you're trying to follow along with that, or follow along with my code, and then I'll start to explain what's going on with all of that. So I think the next step is probably to upload our static resource, just so that we have it. So you downloaded the Leaflet.js zip file, go into the static resources in the setup, and we need to put our JS file in here. It actually already exists. If you so if you're doing this in a Trailhead org, you may already have a Leaflet JS file in here because some of the orgs came with it for different projects. I think it was the Bears one. It's not called Bears, but it's one of the Lightning Web Component things or apps and Trails. They already had, or maybe it's the Dream House. Might be the Dream House, but for me, it's already in here. All you need to do is come in, add new, select your choose your file, call it leaflet.js, and save it. And then that'll be it for making it available to our code. The next portion that we need to do is, let's remove this boilerplate. So we need to actually access our static resource. I was trying to think. I was going to say manage package. So we'll do an import leaflet.js from, and now we're going to put a specific path that it's inside of Salesforce. So this is at Salesforce /resource. Did I spell that right? Resource URL /leaflet. And I think I just named it leaflet instead of leaflet.js. I've got two of them in there hanging out. Okay, and we can close that off. And then the next thing that it says to do on here is to import some specific methods that we need to use to load in our static resource. So for us, we do have a style sheet that we need to load, and we have JavaScript actual scripts that we need to load. So we'll do load style and load script. And this is from Lightning Platform Resource Loader. Cool. So we have our static resource loaded up. We have our static resource accessor, I guess we'll call it, methods in there, and it'll basically just take those and make sure that we can understand it. Cool. Next, we need to actually make some changes when the page loads. So we need to basically load our scripts when they come out. So what we need to do is do a render callback, and we can see it's called after every render of the component, so the actual component itself. So once the component is there, we're going to call this and make some updates. What I want to do first before we render callback, what I want to do first before we move on from this point and start loading the scripts in is just to kind of check out the lifecycle of this actual render itself. So I'm going to right click. You can also right click and do some actions. So I'm going to right click and deploy this to source org. Hopefully we don't have too many issues. Actually, we are going to have a couple issues because this doesn't exist anymore, but let's see what happens. And I'm going to inspect, bring my console up. Let's do it for only selected so we can actually see. Close this out. Do a refresh, and there should be something else going on as soon as this runs. So we're seeing our render callback pop up here. We've got nothing for greeting name anymore, but we can kind of see that it's probably happening a little bit too fast. But when the component loads, this gets our console log gets called. So that's just what I kind of wanted to point out there. So the reason we want to do this is we want to access the component. We want to do an update to the component after it's loaded, basically shoving all of our new script in there. So all of that's why we have to do it after the render callback is done, because the page actually needs to be loaded. There's a couple other, I can't remember what they're specifically called, but there's a couple other methods like render callback that happen in the lifecycle of the LWC component that you can actually call to get things done before stuff happens. So like pre-render, stuff like that. Cool. So now following along with documentation, we need to do a promise. And a promise is basically just an agreement between the code that says, hey, I'm going to ask for something and I'm going to return something. And it's let's say an asynchronous process, or a process that you don't know when it's going to happen, but you know that eventually it will return what you're expecting. And if it doesn't return if it doesn't return or finish its call out, whatever it is, then you can call some errors on that. So we're going to do a promise, and here we go. To access our Leaflet.js static resource and all the JavaScript that lives in there. Cool. So let's start out by promise.all. And we need to, when we're looking at our loader, we need to pass in a list of items, or at least for our promise, we need to pass in a list of items. So we're going to call load script, and then this for this actual component, leaflet, they call it leaflet.js. Is it leaflet? Yeah, it is leaflet. Leaflet. Okay, why did I think that was weird? Leaflet. These are the same word, right? There it is, the F. I was like, these aren't highlighting, nothing's happening, so I got a little confused there. So we're calling leaflet.js. Since this is a zip file that we're getting from this path, we can go into the folders and do leaflet.js. Come on. Oh, don't need that there because we're inside of a list. The next thing we're going to do is load style, because we have a style sheet. And that one is going to be loaded very similarly, leaflet.js plus leaflet.css file. Okay, so basically we're saying, hey, we want to access these things. We don't know, go out, do your system stuff, access it. Once you get it, once you've organized it, once you've done whatever you want to do, this is what we want to do afterwards. So we're going to call this method, or I guess it's the chain of the promise. We are going to call this, put a function in there. And for us, we want to, let's just console log out that we've gotten this far. Inside promise return this, or successfully, because it is a success. It doesn't matter what actually comes out of it, but it's a success at that point. And then let's make sure to check for our errors. So we want to catch any errors that come through. Put that in a variable called error, and then call another function for that, and just say console.log promise return failed. close off that statement here. So we want to try to load our Leaflet JS and our Leaflet JS styles, or our leaflet styles. If it works, we are somehow able to access it, then that's great. We will move into this section of our code. And then if there's an error, we will return, we will say that there was an error. Let's just clean this up a little bit. Save that, and let's actually put our error itself in here, just so that we can see it. Maybe it'll probably be an object. So we're going to deploy that. Looks like that went through successfully. Now, when we reload our page, we're going to cross our fingers that everything worked out properly. And we have something going on here. This is not a function. So we have our promise. Anybody got a typo? Our first section. Our second section. Did it give us a line? What we might have to end up doing is copy and pasting it from the code itself, line 4, but that's not going to be the right one. I'm looking at making sure to stay on top of the documentation that is here. So we got our render callback. We at least got to, let's see, yeah, we didn't even get through to any of these. Reading over our code to see if there's any noticeable problems. Leaflet Jas. All right, let's try taking it from the documentation here. Do a quick comparison. Oh, I said this instead of then. I'm a silly boy. Okay, that should be it. Let me undo all of that. Sorry, was I saying this? I meant then. After we get all this stuff, then we need to do this. Deploy. Let's check it out. Some nice debugging on the fly. Let's make sure this went through. Perfect. Check how I'm doing on time. There we go. The promise returned successfully, and that's what we were looking for there. Cool. So now that we have we've loaded our scripts, we've loaded our styles. Now we can actually start to load up our Leaflet.js map and page. So if we go back to this tutorial, and there's going to be a little bit of in between stuff here. So we've technically already done this. This is if you're working in like standard Node.js or other types of web development, you could load your scripts using something like this, or even Visual Studio Code, you could do something like that too. And then we're going to put it in a div. So let's actually do this part here. let's do this part because they're saying, hey, we need to actually put our map in some type of container. We're going to call this div class and probably map root. And the ID, why not? It'll equal map. And there's something very special about doing changes to the DOM or the HTML after it's loaded for LWC. You'll need to put in this render manual or manual control over the HTML that's loaded. So we'll say manual, and then we'll close all of that up. We will save that. It looks like there's an extra space in here. So we have a container to put our map. That was the next piece on here. And then we actually need to define a height for our container. So to do that, if we're looking in here, there's no specific area to put in the CSS. So what we can actually do is create a heat map.css and start to put some of our CSS in there. So we're going to do our class of map, I think it's map root, and then the height. I don't know, 500 pixels. Sure, let's try that out. So now when we deploy this, we're going to see some extra things come along with it because, or over here, we're going to see a CSS class come along with it. And then let's save this. And if we run it now, nothing's going to show up on the page because it's just an empty div. So let's start working on our actual map itself. So I'm going to bring this down, but now we're going to set up the heat map. So we're going to need to do like a set view and a little bit of configuration on the different layers of the map. So we'll have to do something like this, pick a tile layer. So that's where the map box API comes from. You can see here it's looking for access token. And we can probably, after that, set some markers or something like that. So I'm going to bring this down so I can follow along. Go back to my JS. So now that we have our promise completed, we can now need to initialize our leaflet map. So to do that, we're gonna go outside of our render callback to create another function that we can start to do a bunch of different things around. So I'm going to call this function init leaflet, and let's close this out. And now, instead of writing a ton of code in here of like some of the things we need to do is select our what's it called? Do a query selection of our div. So we'll do something like let heat map equal this dot template query selector, and then the name of our div, which is map root. We're going to do something like that, but instead of writing it all in our promise and making this really ugly and huge, we're going to take this stuff and put it in our init function, and then I'm going to say probably console.log init loaded, and then in here what we're going to do is call this dot init leaflet.js. Let's close this out. Cool. So now we have if our promise returns successfully, we're going to call this init leaflet function, which will then start to do a bunch of setup for our leaflet.js. So now that this should probably be a constant. Now that we have our leaflet map, we need to, or now that we have the div that our map is in. Yeah, it's a div. Now that we have the container that our map is in, we need to start to do some weird stuff on our map. So we can do stuff like let my map equal L dot map, and then this would be heat map. So this L, you may be wondering, like, where the heck did that L come from? L is the leaflet method or class that we are able to use. Like let me bring back up the documentation. L is the overall JavaScript class that we're able to use and do some manipulation upon all the different layers and containers that we have. So that's where that L is coming from. Don't think I'm just like pulling out of my butt. And we're basically doing this. We're selecting our map and we're going to set a specific view for it. And this is going to be a specific location. And then we're going to pick the tile for our map. Oh, I need that. So come back. Where'd it go? Come down here, friend. Cool. So we are passing in our map container, and let's set view to what they have on here. Let me just copy it so I don't mess it up. Cool. So all of that stuff is, we've set up a specific view for a map, but if we actually run this, like I'm going to save this and deploy it, we're not going to see anything on the map itself because we haven't set up a tile for our map. We haven't set up, it's basically like a, we haven't set up a specific, map for us to look at. It's called a tile, but it's an actual, we haven't said what it's going to look like. So now when we take a look over here, it's just completely blank, but we are seeing some different things show up like this little selector. So we at least know that it's working, but we don't know, we're not seeing anything on our map because we haven't selected like a map sheet to look at. But we are seeing on our init load that that is working properly, so that is great. And then this is the part where you will start to need that access token from Mapbox. So if you haven't already, sign up, make an account, and we're going to use that access token in a second here. Cool. Let's close this out. And if we're looking at the documentation, we need to paste in, it's a pretty lengthy section on the tile layer. I guess that's what it's called. It's a layer. And it basically, what it's saying is we are going out to this specific URL, picking this specific map of, it's called Mapbox Street version 11. Here's the size of it, the zoom offset. Don't know what zoom offset is. I'm gonna have to read that, read through that again. And then this is the access token that we need to put in. So I'm gonna copy mine from down here. You should technically have your own, or I mean, I can copy it from here too. Copy that. You should have your own, put that in because there's a limit to how many, there's a limit to where the access token is, what it's being used for. Just for this demo purposes, I have one, you guys can see it. I'm gonna reset it probably in, I don't know, after this video, why not? Or when I'm done with this series, but definitely get your own access token, read through the terms and condition of using Mapbox. Cool, so now we have selected our layer. Let's go ahead and deploy this. Let me deploy it the other way. So Control-Shift-P, deploy this source to org. See if it goes through, if it knows which one. That looked like it worked. And if you see me pressing this little lock here, it's basically making sure that whatever comes up in the output console here, it's always the most recent thing. Cool. So now if we go back into here, let's close this out. And we'll cross our fingers that we'll actually start to see something in here. We do not. What went wrong? Let's continue going through our tutorial. We might have skipped a piece here. So I'm looking through the tutorial here, and this looks like it needs to be a bar. And then these are both called, no, it's camel K. Ugh, JavaScript. So I had that one capitalized. Let me make sure there's nothing else that we need other than the layer and the specific location that we're picking. Let's deploy this again while I read through this. Okay, that went through. Let's give it a whirl. There we go. We're starting to see something here on our map. The attribution's on here, and that's something that's specific to Leaflet. But our map is now working. You know, we can zoom all the way out and see specific things. I don't know where this is, but probably in the middle of nowhere. But we can actually see our map, which is really great. It's inside of Salesforce, and that's one step closer to making a heat map out of our COVID-19 data. You know, if we lost sight a little bit of what the heck we were doing, in the end we're going to probably take the death count and put that on a heat map. But we needed to get this set up first. Cool. So let's just finish playing around with some Leaflet JS things. So they say you can do stuff like add markers to our map and add circles. So I'm just going to copy them here and drop in all of them just so that we can finish out this tutorial. Let's drop them in. And just another way of deploying, you can also go to the file viewer here, deploy this to source.org. Hopefully that goes through. And then now what we should see on here are a bunch of different like shapes, geometry. So we have this thing here. Not seeing anything else. I think we're supposed to see some other stuff. Take a look. Did I copy paste those in right? Got polygons. We have it added to the map. This is a similar location as the other one. It may be the caching. I don't know. Let's look at it. Good stuff coming up here, but invalid lat long. Which one of these is invalid? This is coming from your documentation. What do you mean it's invalid? So we at least get to see an error. It's probably in here somewhere. Let's maybe move this to 9, just so that it's on top of the same thing. Deploy this. And checking the time here, we're getting close to the end, at least for this hour. We've at least done what we've wanted to get done, which is be able to load the map properly. Did this work? No. Looks like there's something up with the... So one thing that we're seeing here is that if our promise does fail, this is what the error message, or this is what is coming out of it. So that's kind of cool. So this is saying invalid object. Let's see if we can find this one. Now I'm hooked. Yeah, it's for the circle. I'm looking at what they have here for the circle, and that's literally what they got. I don't know, maybe maybe I'm on a different version than what they're running on. I can try to switch this to my other version that I have from another project. Let's try to deploy that and see if the -11 works. I want you guys to see the circles. we please hide some of these? There we go. So it's definitely the version that has an issue with the lat long. So not a big deal there. Just make sure you've downloaded the latest version. I think that the old version that I had was from when Salesforce put it in, but that version 1 that I have is the latest one, because I think we'll need that for the heat map. Cool. So that is it for today. We have been able to create a map and put it on inside of Salesforce using Lightning Web Components. We were also able to upload static resources, fix our schedule jobs. So that should be working properly. In the next episode, most likely next week, I will start to work on this heat map even more, doing something similar to this tutorial that they have going on here in Leaflet, where they're showing like the different densities and different things that's going on. So that's pretty cool, and it has like a hover effect too, which is awesome. So yeah, there's a little bit of work that's going to go into that. We're going to be picking a different tile and doing some interesting stuff there. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. And as always, remember, I believe in you.